The great throne room of the Zathari Empire was not a place for humans. Its ceiling reached so high that even sound seemed to tremble before it. Crystal pillars glowed with soft light, alive with strange energy. Rows of alien lords stood tall, their silver eyes sharp and cold. Every movement carried pride, every breath reminded outsiders of their power. And yet, in the middle of that shining hall, stood a single human. Ethan. He was not the strongest soldier of Earth. He was not the most skilled diplomat. He was simply a man who had survived a war no one should have survived. He had scars on his arms, memories in his heart, and courage that refused to break. When the peace delegation asked for someone to stand as Earth's envoy, Ethan had stepped forward. Not because he wanted honor, but because he wanted peace to mean something. Now, as he stood before the Zathari queen, his chest felt heavy. She sat on a throne carved from living crystal, a seat that seemed to breathe with light. Her crown shimmered like a second sun, and her presence was enough to make the bravest of her kind bow. She was taller than him, her silver eyes deep like oceans he had never known. She was the queen of 1,000 worlds, a ruler whose words carried more weight than weapons. For a long moment she said nothing. The hall was quiet. The alien lords watched, their faces filled with suspicion. To them, Ethan was fragile, small, unworthy. They had fought against humans, seen their ships burn, seen their weakness. And now, one of those same humans dared to stand in the most sacred chamber of their empire. Ethan felt their eyes pressing on him. He wanted to look down. He wanted to hide. But he forced himself to stand tall. He told himself again and again, I am not here for myself. I am here for all of Earth. Finally, the queen's voice broke the silence. Her tone was calm but sharp, like steel wrapped in silk. Human, what makes you stand before me? Do you not fear the weight of this hall? Her words echoed, but Ethan's reply came steady. I fear many things, Your Majesty, but I do not fear you. Gasps rose among the lords, some hissed in anger. One even stepped forward as if to strike him. But the queen raised a hand, and the hall fell silent again. She studied him, her eyes narrowing as if trying to see beyond his words, beyond his face. Ethan's heart pounded. He had spoken boldly, maybe too boldly. But he did not take it back. He had seen enough war to know that fear was always there. The question was not whether a man feared. It was whether he still stood. The queen tilted her head slightly. A faint glimmer, almost like curiosity, touched her expression. You speak without trembling, she said. Your world has suffered. You have lost much. And yet, you stand. Ethan nodded. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. We lost too much in the war. Families, homes, dreams. But if we are to have peace, someone has to stand here. Someone has to look at you and say that we are not enemies anymore. I chose to be that someone. For the first time, something softened in her silver gaze. Not pity, not weakness, but recognition. She knew the weight of loss. She had carried it longer than him. She understood the price of leadership. The alien lords shifted uncomfortably. They did not like the way their queen was listening, but they could not deny what they saw. The human was not begging, not crawling. He stood as if his small body carried the strength of an entire world. Silence stretched again. The hall seemed to hold its breath. And in that silence, the impossible happened. The queen's lips curved just slightly into something no one in the chamber expected. A smile. It was small, fleeting, but it was real. And in that moment, Ethan knew. The war had ended with treaties and signatures, but true peace, true trust, was being born here, in this hall, in the gaze between a human soldier and an alien queen. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if he would be welcomed or hated. But as her eyes lingered on him, something unspoken passed between them. It was the first spark of a bond neither of them understood yet. a bond that would change not only their lives but the fate of two entire worlds. Days passed after the meeting in the throne room, but the image of that moment stayed in Ethan's heart. He had stood before the alien queen, ready to be crushed by her presence, but instead he saw something unexpected, a smile, faint but real. That single smile had given him hope. Ethan remained on the palace grounds as Earth's envoy. At first he thought he would only attend official meetings, deliver messages, and then leave. But it did not happen that way. The queen, whose name was Seraphine in the human tongue, asked for him often. She wanted to hear from him, to know more about Earth, to listen to stories from a world she had never walked upon. At first, their talks were formal. He bowed and addressed her as, "Your Majesty," and she spoke with the weight of her crown in every word. But slowly, something began to change. She started asking about his childhood. He told her about fishing with his father, about climbing trees with scraped knees, about sitting under a night sky filled with stars that seemed so close he could almost touch them. She listened with quiet attention. Sometimes her eyes softened as if she were not a queen but simply a woman hearing of a life she had never lived. And in return she told him of her own world, of ancient traditions, of the burden of the crown, of the endless ceremonies that filled her days. Ethan noticed something in her voice whenever she spoke about her duties. There was strength, yes, but also loneliness. She carried the weight of 1,000 worlds, yet there was no one beside her who truly saw her. Everyone bowed, everyone obeyed, but no one listened. Not the way he did. One evening, after a long council meeting, she asked him to walk with her through the palace gardens. The alien flowers glowed with their own light, casting silver and blue across the paths. Ethan felt small, standing beside her tall figure, but she did not seem to notice the difference. "Your world," she said softly. "You spoke of oceans. Tell me again what they are like." He smiled. "Imagine a sky, endless and wide. But instead of stars, it is filled with water, blue as far as you can see. It moves and breathes like a living thing, and when the wind touches it, waves rise and crash, singing songs older than men." The queen closed her eyes for a moment. "Your words make me see it," she whispered. "I wish I could stand there just once." Ethan looked at her, the most powerful being he had ever known, and saw not a ruler but a woman longing for something simple, something real. His heart ached. Over time, their meetings grew longer. He began to notice her laugh, quiet but true, whenever he made a clumsy joke. She teased him about how fragile humans seemed, yet admired the strength in their spirits. And he began to see her not just as a queen, but as someone carrying an unbearable weight with grace. But with every new moment, Ethan's heart grew heavier. He was falling for her. He knew it. He told himself it was madness. She was a queen, alien, untouchable. Yet when her eyes lingered on him, when her voice softened, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, she felt something too. The palace lords began to notice. Whispers spread. They spoke in low tones when Ethan passed, their silver eyes sharp with suspicion. To them, he was a stranger in their sacred hall, and worse, the queen seemed to favor him. But none of that mattered to Ethan in those quiet moments with her. When she asked him about his family, when she shared her fears of being alone, when their laughter broke the silence of the cold palace, it was as if the war, the distance, the crown, none of it existed. One night, as they stood beneath the glowing trees of the garden, the queen looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. It was not duty, not curiosity, but something gentler. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You are different, Ethan. You speak to me not as a ruler, but as me. Do you understand what that means?" He swallowed hard, his chest tight. "It means you trust me, and I will never break that trust." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Then she turned away, hiding whatever emotion had touched her face. But Ethan knew. He had seen it. The bond between them was no longer only diplomacy. It was something deeper, something that grew with every word, every glance, every shared silence. Neither of them said the word for it yet, but both of them felt it. And in that quiet garden, among glowing flowers and alien stars, the first threads of love began to weave between a human soldier and an alien queen. The bond between Ethan and Queen Seraphine deepened with every passing day. What began as duty had grown into something that neither of them could easily name. He was Earth's envoy. She was ruler of 1,000 worlds. Yet when they were together, the titles seemed to fade. Ethan often lay awake in the guest chambers, at night, staring at the alien ceiling, his heart restless. He tried to remind himself of who he was. A soldier, scarred and ordinary. A man who once had nothing but a uniform and a cause. And who was she? The queen, the highest voice of her people, the very symbol of Zathari power. It was foolish. It was dangerous. Yet no matter how much he tried to silence it, his heart told him the truth. He loved her. The realization struck him one night after a meeting where Seraphine had defended his words against a council of her own lords. He remembered the way her voice had been calm but firm, the way her silver eyes had softened when she looked at him. She had spoken not only as a queen protecting an envoy, but as someone who cared for him. That night, Ethan felt a weight inside him. Love was no small thing. Love could build bridges, but it could also burn kingdoms. The next day, he tried to distance himself. He spoke less. He bowed more. He acted like a messenger and nothing more. He told himself it was safer this way, that he had no right to look at her with the longing in his chest. But Seraphine noticed. "Why do you grow silent, Ethan?" she asked one evening, her gaze sharp. They stood in the grand hall, light pouring through crystal walls. He lowered his eyes. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I forget myself sometimes. I am only a man from Earth. I should not overstep." For a long moment she studied him. Then, with a quiet sigh, she said, "You speak as if I do not see the truth already. You are more than a messenger, Ethan, more than a soldier. To me, you are different." Her words struck deep. His heart thundered. He wanted to tell her everything, to pour out the storm inside him, but fear held him back. What if this was only kindness? What if she meant nothing more? What if speaking would shatter what they had? That night in the palace gardens he finally broke. The stars above were strange, glowing brighter than those of Earth. The flowers shimmered with silver light. And Seraphine walking beside him seemed almost unreal, like a dream he should never touch. "Seraphine," he whispered before he could stop himself. She turned, her crown glowing faintly in the starlight. "Yes, Ethan." His throat tightened. The word love sat heavy on his tongue, but he could not speak it. Instead, he looked into her eyes and saw something that nearly undid him. There was warmth. There was longing. And there was the same loneliness he carried in his own soul. Then he realized he was not alone in this feeling. Seraphine, the queen of 1,000 worlds, was bound by chains of duty. Everyone saw her crown, but no one saw her. And when she looked at Ethan, she was not a queen. She was simply a woman who wanted to be understood. That night, as they stood under the stars, their silence spoke more than words ever could. He did not confess, and she did not demand. But the truth hung between them, undeniable and alive. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan carried this realization in his heart like fire. It warmed him, but it also burned. He knew their bond was dangerous. If the council learned of it, they would see it as weakness, as betrayal, and Earth might see him as reckless, risking the fragile peace for his own heart. But love cannot be buried forever. Each time she laughed at his clumsy words, each time her hand brushed his as they walked, each time her silver eyes lingered on him longer than they should have, the truth grew stronger. Ethan was in love with the alien queen, and though the galaxy itself stood between them, he could no longer deny it. He did not yet know how or when or what price it would demand. But the realization had changed him forever. He could not turn back. The palace was not blind. Whispers grew like shadows along its long crystal halls. The lords of the Zathari had sharp eyes, and they noticed how often their queen called for the human envoy. They noticed how her voice softened when she spoke to him, how her gaze lingered too long. To them it was dangerous. To them, it was unthinkable. At first, the whispers were small, but soon they became words spoken openly in council chambers. One evening, Ethan entered the throne room with a message from Earth. He expected to deliver it and leave, but instead, he walked into a storm. A tall lord with silver horns stepped forward, his voice heavy with anger. "Your Majesty, forgive my boldness, but this cannot continue. This human is always at your side. He is fragile, short-lived, and unworthy. The throne should not lower itself to speak with one so small." The words cut deep, but Ethan kept silent. He had learned to hold his tongue in this place. Still, his fists clenched at his sides. The queen rose from her throne, her crystal crown burning with light. Her voice was calm, but each word struck like iron. "Lord Kale, do not mistake my patience for weakness. This human has shown courage where many of our own faltered. He has stood when others bowed. He has spoken when others stayed silent. He has earned his place here." The hall grew silent, but the anger did not fade. Another counselor stepped forward, his silver eyes narrow. "Your Majesty, you defend him as if he were more than an envoy. The people will see this. They will question your judgment. A queen does not favor outsiders." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to shout that it was not true, that he was only here for peace, that nothing dishonorable had passed between them. But the words died in his throat. He could not deny that what they said was half true, because in his heart, he did love her. After the meeting, Seraphine walked with him into the gardens. The glow of the flowers lit her face, but her eyes were troubled. She said nothing for a long while. Only the sound of water flowing in crystal fountains filled the silence. Finally, she stopped walking and looked at him. "Ethan, I fear I have placed you in danger." He frowned. "Danger? Why?" "Because my council sees what I feel," she whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "They see how I trust you, how I look at you. They will not forgive it easily. To them, a queen must stand apart. To them, my heart is a weapon they can use against me." Ethan's throat grew dry. His heart ached at her words. He wanted to tell her the truth, to tell her that he loved her, that he would endure anything for her. But he also feared what such a confession would bring. Would it break her rule? Would it bring ruin to the fragile peace? "I never wanted to harm you," he said softly. "If my presence makes your rule harder, I will leave. Say the word and I will walk away." Her silver eyes widened, and for a moment pain flashed across her face. She turned away, her crown catching the starlight. "Do you think I wish you gone? No, Ethan. Your presence is the only thing that lightens this crown I carry. But I am torn between two duties, the duty to my people and the duty to my heart." The words left Ethan breathless. She had not said love, but he felt it in every syllable. They stood there, facing one another. The night wind cold around them. Between them stretched two paths, one of duty, heavy and lonely, the other of love, dangerous and uncertain. The lords would not stop whispering. The council would not forgive easily. And beyond them, the galaxy itself seemed to watch. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest. He knew that one day soon they would be forced to choose, and when that moment came, it would not only decide their future, it would decide the fate of two entire worlds. For the first time since he had met her, Ethan felt the true weight of the storm they were walking into. And yet, even with fear burning in his chest, he knew one thing with certainty. He would not turn away from her. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed were heavy with silence. The council grew colder, the lords sharper with their words, and even the guards seemed to watch, Ethan with suspicious eyes. Every step he took inside the palace felt like walking across a thin sheet of glass that could shatter at any moment. But the hardest silence of all was the one between him and Seraphine. She still called for him, but her words were measured, her tone restrained. She looked at him less, as if afraid her gaze would betray her heart. And Ethan, though desperate to speak, held his tongue. He feared that one wrong word could bring ruin to everything. One evening, unable to endure the wait any longer, Ethan stood in the palace gardens, his heart restless. The glowing flowers lit the night, casting shadows that seemed to reach for him. He thought of Earth, of home, of how simple life had once been. But now he was standing in the heart of an empire, caught in a storm that could swallow him whole. He knew the truth could not stay buried. He loved her, and it was tearing him apart. When Seraphine entered the garden that night, her steps were quiet, but Ethan felt her presence before he even turned. She stood with her crown glimmering faintly under the stars, her silver eyes watching him. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with all the words they had never said. Finally, Ethan broke. His voice was unsteady but strong. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing his head. "I cannot keep this inside any longer. I must speak, even if it costs me everything." Seraphine's brow furrowed. "Ethan." He raised his eyes to hers, and the truth spilled out. "I love you." The words hung in the air, fragile but unshakable. His chest ached as if his heart had leapt out of him, vulnerable and bare. He had spoken what he swore he never would, and now there was no turning back. For a moment she said nothing. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Ethan feared he had destroyed everything. Then Seraphine stepped closer. Her voice was soft, trembling in a way he had never heard before. "You are bold, human. To love me is to invite the wrath of my council, the fury of my people, and the scorn of your own world. Do you understand the weight of what you ask?" "Yes," Ethan whispered. "I understand. And still, I love you. I would rather face the fury of 1,000 worlds than live one more day pretending I don't." Her eyes shimmered, and for a heartbeat, the queen seemed to vanish, leaving only the woman behind. "I never wanted to let myself feel this," she confessed. "But when you look at me, you see more than a crown. You see me, and in your eyes I am not alone. Ethan, you are the only one who makes me feel alive." His breath caught. Those words were everything he had dreamed to hear, and more. The storm inside him could no longer be contained. His knees felt weak, his heart thundered, but he dropped to one knee, not in duty but in love. His voice cracked as he spoke the words that had burned in his chest for so long. "Seraphine, queen of the Zaithari, will you marry me?" The night seemed to hold its breath. The garden fell silent. Even the glowing flowers seemed frozen in time. Ethan's entire world hung on the edge of her next words. Seraphine stood still, her face unreadable, her silver eyes searching his soul. For a long, terrible moment, Ethan thought she might refuse, that his love was too heavy, too dangerous. But then she stepped forward, lifting his chin so that his eyes met hers. Her voice was steady, clear, and filled with a strength that shook him to his core. "Yes." The single word broke through the silence like sunlight through storm clouds. Ethan's chest filled with a joy so fierce it nearly brought him to tears. He wanted to speak, but his voice was gone, stolen by the weight of her answer. She smiled, a real smile, brighter than any he had seen before. "I agree to marry you, Ethan of Earth. Let the stars themselves hear it." And in that moment, under the silver light of alien stars, two hearts from different worlds chose each other, not out of duty, not out of politics, but out of love. Q. Decision had been made. The path ahead would be filled with storms. But together they would face them all. The throne room was vast, glowing with cold silver light from the great crystal walls. The high lords and nobles of the Zaithari filled the chamber, their eyes sharp, their voices restless. They had gathered for a council meeting, but something far greater was about to unfold. Ethan stood in the center of the hall, his heart thundering like a drum. His knees were weak, but he refused to tremble. He had spoken the words already under the quiet of the palace gardens. "Will you marry me?" But now, before the lords, the guards, and the galaxy itself, the question hung heavier than ever. The queen had not answered that night in the garden. She had whispered of her heart, of her longing, but the final vow had not yet been spoken. And now, standing in the throne room, Ethan knew the time had come. The counselors were already restless. Whispers darted through the chamber like knives. The human is too close to her. He is a danger. He seeks to bind the queen. Lord Kale, the sharpest among them, stepped forward. His voice was full of scorn. "Your Majesty, this cannot continue. This human oversteps. He dares to stand where only kings of our people have stood. He dares to hope for what no Zathari lord has ever been given. Will you allow this insult to your crown?" Ethan felt every gaze on him, cold, piercing, full of hatred. He wanted to look away, but he forced himself to raise his chin. His heart beat painfully in his chest, but his voice was steady. "I did not come to insult your queen. I came to give her my truth. I love her. And if love is an insult, then let it be so. But I will never take my words back." A ripple of anger swept through the hall. Some lords hissed, others shouted. The guards shifted uneasily, their hands on their weapons. But above all the noise, Seraphine remained silent. She sat on her throne, tall and regal, her crown glowing faintly. Her silver eyes were fixed on Ethan, unreadable, like oceans too deep to see the bottom. She did not speak. She did not move. The silence grew heavier with every passing second. Ethan's throat tightened. His knees wanted to buckle. His mind screamed that he had gone too far. Maybe she would deny him here before everyone. Maybe she would cut him down with a single word to prove to her people that their queen could not be swayed by a human's heart. But even with that fear burning, inside him, Ethan did not take back his words. He had given her his truth. If it cost him his life, so be it. The chamber seemed frozen in time. The lords leaned forward, waiting for her answer. The guards held their breath. Even the hum of the living crystals that lined the walls seemed to dim. Finally, Seraphine rose from her throne. Her movements were slow, deliberate, every step echoing in the vast silence. She walked down the crystal steps until she stood only a few feet away from Ethan. Her eyes locked on his, and for a long, endless moment, she simply looked at him. The weight of her gaze was unbearable and yet filled with something tender. Ethan felt as if she were searching his very soul. Then at last she spoke. "I have ruled for many years," she said, her voice calm, but carrying to every corner of the hall. "I have carried the crown of my ancestors, borne the weight of 1,000 worlds, and stood alone when no one else would. All my life they told me a queen must never give her heart, for her heart belongs to her people. And yet," she paused, her silver eyes shimmering, "this human stands before me unafraid, offering not power, not wealth, not kingdoms, but love." The hall erupted with voices. Some shouted in anger, some cried in disbelief. But Seraphine raised a hand, and the chamber fell silent once more. Her gaze softened as she looked at Ethan, and then, clearly for all to hear, she said the words that shattered the silence. "I agree." The hall froze. Gasps filled the chamber. Some lords staggered back in shock, others fell to their knees in despair. Never in the history of their empire had a queen chosen an outsider, let alone a human. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. For a moment, he thought he had dreamed it, that his ears had betrayed him. But the warmth in her eyes told him it was real. She had chosen him. And in that vast, shining hall with every eye upon them, Ethan knew that their world and the galaxy had just changed forever. The queen's words, "I agree," echoed through the throne room like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was so heavy it seemed the very walls of crystal held their breath. Then all at once voices erupted. Some nobles shouted in outrage, "Impossible! A human cannot stand as our queen's consort." Others pleaded for her to reconsider, calling it madness, a betrayal of tradition. Yet among the chaos, a few younger lords looked on with wonder, their eyes wide as if witnessing history being written. But Seraphine did not falter. She stood tall, her crown burning like starlight, her hand resting gently over her heart. When she raised her voice, the room fell, silent again. "I am your queen," she said firmly. "My word is law, and my choice is made." Her silver eyes turned to Ethan, soft yet strong. "I choose him." Ethan's chest tightened, his breath caught. In that instant, the fear, the whispers, the endless doubt, everything vanished. The only thing that mattered was the woman standing before him, not as a ruler but as someone who had given him her heart. The council could not undo her decision. The lords could not challenge it. The guards did not dare raise a hand. And so, the impossible became reality. The alien queen had accepted the love of a human. The days that followed shook the empire. Across the 1,000 worlds of the Zathari, news spread like wildfire. Some cursed the choice, some protested in anger, claiming the queen had shamed her crown. But others, many others, saw something new in her decision. They saw hope. For centuries, the Zathari had stood apart, proud and distant. Now their queen had reached across the stars and chosen love over tradition. And that choice, though shocking, planted seeds of change. Ethan, meanwhile, felt the weight of his new place. No longer just an envoy, no longer just a soldier, he stood at Seraphine's side as her chosen. The palace halls that once felt cold and hostile began to soften. Some servants greeted him with respect. Some guards, once suspicious, now bowed their heads. But the greatest change was within himself. For years, Ethan had thought of himself as ordinary, one soldier among millions, a man forgotten by history. Yet now, he was part of something far greater. Not because of rank, not because of power, but because he had dared to love when love seemed impossible. The ceremony was unlike anything Ethan had imagined. The throne room was filled with light, the living crystals singing with strange harmonies. The queen wore her crown brighter than ever, but her eyes never left Ethan's. Before the gathered lords and envoys, Seraphine took his hand. Her voice was steady, echoing through the chamber. "Today I bind my fate not to politics nor to tradition but to love. Let the stars themselves witness it. Let every world know it. I do not stand above him, nor does he stand above me. We stand together." Ethan's throat tightened, tears threatening his eyes. When it was his turn, his voice cracked, but his words were clear. "I was only a soldier. I had nothing but scars and memories of war. Yet you saw me, not as weak, not as small, but as a man. I cannot promise you riches or crowns, but I can promise you my heart, my loyalty, and my love for as long as I breathe." The hall erupted, not in anger, but in awe. The union was sealed. Later, when the ceremony was over and the noise of the palace had faded, Ethan and Seraphine walked alone through the gardens. The flowers glowed softly, the stars shone bright above, and for the first time, there was peace. She leaned gently against him, her voice quiet. "You have changed everything, Ethan. Not just for me, but for my people, for yours. Do you realize that?"